The Kerner Café that kept our time. I was 47 when I learned that memory has a smell. Not the sharp bite of new paint or the sugary drift of a waiting room, but the warm breath of an old cafe opening itself to evening. Citrus oil rubbed into wood, coffee blooming in small bursts, rain carried in on jackets and umbrellas. The cafe had lived longer than my leases, tucked into the bend of a brick street where the pavement buckled like a tired spine. It wasn't glamorous two-clouded windows, a bell over the door that missed the same note every time, yet stepping inside felt like entering a pocket of patient weather. I didn't go for romance, and I didn't go for habit. I went because the lights were gentle, and because I had stopped sleeping well. The sounds, porcelain tapping, spoons whispering against cups, the soft yawns of the espresso machine settled over me like a second blanket. For an hour, I could pretend the world did not demand new heroics every morning. I took the table by the window fan that rattled like a distant train. I placed my phone face down, as if turning it into a stone would keep it from buzzing with other people's emergencies. That is how I learned the rhythm of the regulars. Mr. Ahmed, whose rain-cloud suit never wrinkled, folded his newspaper with the discipline of a soldier making his bed. Layla arrived just before sunset, carrying the scent of roses from a garden that must be thorns in winter and fireworks in June. Daria, a retired music teacher, kept a metronome in her purse. She tapped it twice on the table, set it ticking, and only then began to speak, as though conversation owed the room a tempo. Yusuf told jokes that were never quite funny, and we laughed anyway because some laughter is for survival, not accuracy. We were not friends the way teenagers are friends, hot and quick and loud. We were adjacent middle chapters in a quiet library. We nodded. We saved each other's seats with a scarf or a folded napkin. We learned the art of not asking a second question when the answer to the first came back as a long stare. When a newcomer appeared, we made space the way the sea makes space for every stone that jumps in, without complaint, with ripples. Behind the counter, Mina kept an old radio with a dial and a warm back like a small Sunday. She tuned it to a station that played songs from 20 and 30 years ago, the unflashy soundtrack of kitchens, school runs, and long drives. Sometimes she turned the volume down when the news arrived, as if she wished to blunt the world's edges before they reached us. Other nights, she turned it up and let commercials pour across the room with their cheerful certainty that everything broken could be bought and fixed by dinner. I began carrying a notebook because it felt wrong not to keep something. Not the big events, holidays, and hospital visits carve their own grooves, but the middle things. A woman described her divorce as removing a ring from a swollen finger. An old man's laugh was a cough that had forgiven itself. The tilt of Layla's head when she listened made her earrings catch the lamplight and answer for her. The radio, the clatter, the friendly argument about thyme versus rosemary, these were the minutes I collected. The unremarkable coins that add up to a life. One rainy Thursday in late autumn, the door stuck and then let go as if it had changed its mind. A man entered carrying a shoebox. He had a gardener's hand scuffed, nicked, clean, and hair rushing toward gray as though late to an appointment. He set the box on my table with the care of someone returning a bird to its nest. "Are you the one who collects?" he asked. "Collects what?" I said. "Stories," he answered. Mina told me. Mina glanced up from the espresso machine and waved a dishcloth in a little yes. "I collect moments," I said. "They don't always become stories." Inside lay cassette tapes, their labels handwritten in a patient, looping script. Side A, August evenings. Side B, morning traffic. "My wife recorded the radio," he said. "Not the music, the space between. The callers, the ads, the way the host laughed when a kid said something ridiculous. When she got sick, she played these and traveled back to a world where days felt long enough. Where is she now? I asked, though I already knew the shape of his answer. Gone, he said, not as a blow, but like telling you the bus had already left. I don't know what to do with them. They aren't songs, they're air with fingerprints. Maybe you could listen and tell me if there is anything worth keeping. I touched the cassette with the back of a finger, the way you touch a sleeping baby's foot. I'll try, I said. Even if there's nothing to tell, there's something to keep. He smiled as if a seatbelt had finally clicked, ordered chamomile tea, and sat with Daria, who steadied the metronome and interrogated him about soil as if it were a character reference. At home, I still owned a player with a stubborn pause button and a hunger for ribbon. The first hiss was ocean loud. Then the host's warm, formal voice welcomed listeners to the late afternoon program. The tape carried the texture of time, weather reports that had long since been wrong, lottery numbers from drawings that made strangers briefly lucky, advertisements for stores that had closed and reopened as other stores and then as dreams. Each ordinary detail knitted a sweater of certainty I could wear for an hour. On one tape, a father read a poem about driving his daughter to school in winter and discovering that the sun can teach you how to start late and still arrive. On another, a woman asked how to cook eggplant without bitterness. The tenderness in the host's advice felt like prayer. Between them, he laughed, a laugh trained on living rooms and steering wheels. I listened until night rolled me into morning, until buses yawned awake and the city remembered its chores. When I returned the tapes 2 days later, I had more than a story. I had a thesis. We have been measuring life with the wrong ruler, I told the gardener. We count promotions and purchases and parties the tall marks, but your wife saved the small ones. Weather, recurring jokes, the Thursday recipe, the way the host always said friends before listeners. The small marks keep the tall ones from falling over. He looked past me toward the window as if trying to see measurements written on light. So what do? We pay attention, I said, and we stay. He began coming on Thursdays. He and Daria argued about tempo and soil acidity. Layla brought him cuttings wrapped in damp paper towels as if smuggling secrets. Sometimes, when the radio softened, Mina played one of the tapes in the back, and the cafe belonged to 2 decades at once. We laughed at ads promising indestructible hose nozzles. We listened to callers complain about the price of milk from a year when milk seemed impossibly cheap. That winter, the streets iced early and thawed late. The city clenched its jaw. People stayed home, but the regulars kept finding their way, boots leaving prints that delighted just long enough. One evening, Mr. Ahmed's newspaper lay folded and untouched. He stared at the blank side as if a headline might appear by mercy. "It's my son," he said when I asked. "He wants me to sell. He says the stairs are too steep and the winter's too long. He says many true things, but every room in that house knows my name." We shared the careful silence reserved for leaving. The radio hummed a ballad that knew how to bow without collapsing. When the song ended, we began gently to add what would be lost and what might be found. The cafe acted as witness and jury, mercy and forecast. That was its gift. That was what we became for one another. By May, the gardener placed a flat of seedlings on the windowsill. Basil, mint, thyme, a few brave tomatoes. For the air, he told Mina. For the smell that brings everyone home. Summer made the cafe a garden with a part-time job. The radio read recipes sent by listeners. Mina tested them, and the successful ones appeared on a chalkboard like invitations. We argued about light angles and the tyranny of the west-facing window. We kept the hum going, not because anything extraordinary happened, but because ordinary had revealed itself as rare and worth protecting. That was the year my sister called and, in a voice that had erased its adjectives, told me our mother had fallen. I left for 2 months to become a daughter who remembered chargers and insurance cards, and which nurse knew the stubborn recliner. In the second week, an envelope arrived, posted from the Café. Inside was a page torn from my notebook, the one where I kept what the world forgot to keep. The regulars had copied lines they remembered me writing. "Bring this air with you," the note said. "We are watering your chair. Middle age is a second adolescence with quieter skin and louder clocks. You practice new kinds of bravery, asking for help, canceling plans you long to keep, calling back without a script." When I returned in late August, the radio played a song from the year I learned to drive. For an instant, I felt 16 and infinite. Then my keys jabbed my thigh and the mortgage tapped my shoulder. Memory didn't mind the collision. It made a chord and carried on. In early autumn, we held a ceremony for the tapes. The gardener lined a fresh shoebox with tissue. We each chose one cassette, pressed it to an ear, and listened to the quiet between old sounds. Then we traded, passing the warmth as if it were a baby. Mina wrote the date on the lid, looped kitchen twine around it, and placed it beneath the radio. "Time belongs to whoever tends it," she said. "We're not burying these, we're planting them." When winter returned, Mr. Ahmed moved. He sold the house with the rooms that knew his name and found a ground-floor apartment 10 blocks away. The day after the move, he walked in carrying the single plant that had survived. He set it on the counter, then sat, out of breath and out of jokes, and we watched him gather himself like a man sorting puzzle pieces by color. The radio promised a thaw. We promised the same. Years do not slow because we learn their tricks. We lost people. Layla stopped coming. Her roses demanded more of her, and then the silence that followed demanded more of us. Deria moved closer to her daughter and, through calls that skipped like stones, taught us how to find rhythm without a metronome. The gardener met a woman at the market who sold antique buttons and knew the names of clouds. He brought her one evening, and we taught her how to listen to a room without making it shy. Mina's nephew painted the sign twice and refused payment except in soup, which felt like the right currency for a place that measured riches in steam. As for me, I kept writing not a book, not a blog, nothing the world could measure. I wrote to lay breadcrumbs so the person I had been and the person I might become could find each other in the dark. On a soft spring evening, the radio host announced a call for stories. Listeners could share a minute about a place that made them feel less alone. Mina looked at me like someone whose child had practiced. I called. The line was busy, and then it wasn't. I gave my name. I gave the address. I told the city about a cafe that kept our time, about the comfort of the same chair waiting for you after a hard day, about the bravery of showing up with nothing but your quiet, steady breath. After I hung up the room, exhaled like a theater when the lights rise. Someone clapped once, not for me, but for the idea that the small things we love can become communal. The radio played a chorus that felt like a handshake. For a week, new people came. They were shy, as one is when entering a room humming with a tradition you cannot yet hear. We made space. We rearranged our ripples. Mina added 2 stools with crooked legs and